Welcome to this video briefing. I'm going to go through all the controller documentation that we have put out in this new format. It's on the Wikipedia website of VATSIM Scandinavia, and I'm going to go through this whole thing with you. First thing up, you've probably seen this is a very long briefing. It is not a mandatory briefing. You can freely choose just to read through the manuals if that's what you prefer. This is basically a helping hand to take you through all these many new procedures and put them with the explanation because it's a completely new structure. You can take chapters down the YouTube line as you can see, where you can go through the S2, S3, and C1 levels as you like. Of course, I recommend you to see the whole thing if you have the time to it. And I'm just going to walk through all the procedures and highlight what has changed here in the meantime, because quite a lot of things has. We've done this to structure the manuals. We've had a very nice opportunity to actually mimic the real manuals of Copenhagen and Navier in general. So we're trying to structure it so it looks as close as possible to the real life, and so the procedures are as close to the real life as possible. And on top of that, we're going to take advantage of this new Wikipedia format that makes it much more transparent when we do updates and changing things and so on and so forth. Just before we begin, just a real quick between the LOP. This is what you've been used to from the website so far. This thing has been deleted. This is gone because this is not what it's called real life. We adopted the real life designation for these manuals as well. It comes from, most of you probably heard about the BLs, like the BL 714, and this is the law documents, and it's mainly for the pilot side. However, there's also ones on the air traffic control side. These are called ATS instructions, like air traffic service instructions. This is kind of the law document behind the general procedures and general things of how you should be an air traffic controller. And once you start diving into the local procedures we have in Denmark, it is called a local ATS instruction. So this is what it's called. It's called a LAI, a local ATS instruction. So yeah, not much more from that right now. I think we should just go straight into it. Here you see the VATSIM Scandinavia website. In the future, you'll be able to go in via the ATC and the document. And once you push to Denmark, you'll be taken straight in to the Wikipedia website. And it looks like this. There's going to be the one for all the countries. Of course, you want to go in and click on the Danish one. On the Danish one, the layout may change a little bit compared to what you see here. Of course, we always update it, but this is generally how it looks. Divided into 9 sections. The 3 ones on the top are the 3 most important ones. The 3 in the middle is kind of slightly less important, and the 3 in the bottom is just kind of supporting documentation. What we're going to look through today is the 3 important ones. It's also the only 3 that has been made so far. Things will be updated as we go along. However, we're going to go through 2 of them very, very quickly. The GOP, or general procedures, just to let you know, it's still being in work in progress at this stage. This is just for VATSIM stuff. It has nothing to do with the actual controlling. So this is all about, what do we simulate, what do we not simulate, taking over positions, rostering and events, all this stuff you used to find in the general and supplementary section of the old LOP is basically put together here. The letters of agreement, you also know, this is also a very simple thing. You just have one topic and you have the different LOAs here that you can come in and find, as well as the latest updated date. We're not going to go through that more. The thing that we like to look at here is the local ATS instruction. This is the new thing. So let's just go through that. As you open it up, you'll see you have a whole big collection of LAIs. Now, to begin with here, don't get confused. So each one of these books contains an LAI collection. And inside the collection are different local ATS instructions, as you see. Obviously, because in the real world, nobody is knowing all of these because we only rated for one position. On VATSIM, we're rated for all the positions, so that's why we have all of them at the LAI collection. You can either click on them and go into, or you can just drop down and see the different manuals that you have in each. We're going to go through the 3 main ones today. We're going to go through the one for Kastrup Tower, the one for Copenhagen Approach, and the one for ACC, an S2, an S3, and a C1 level. So without any more, let's go into the first one. So this is the LAI collection for Kastrup Tower. This one, as you can see, it has some details about when it was created, when it was last updated, so you can always check the latest revisions to this. You can see you have 8 LAIs. They vary a little bit from topic to topic, but they all have some some similarities. First of all, is the first one will always be general, which is just talking a little bit about the purpose, talking about what the different LAIs are, and some abbreviations to things that you may know or may not know in the LAIs. Generally, this LAI 1 does not concern itself with controlling. What you have is what comes further down. So the way it's structured on the tower side is you have one specifically for the tower control, one specifically for the apron control, a one that you will see in all the LAIs coming in, a specific book for the different coordination agreement. And then last but not least, you will have 4 LAIs specifically talking about the different runway configuration. You can also see there's a brief description under each LAI about what it does. So let's begin. Tower control. This is the first LAI. It talks a little bit about the area responsibility, the different designated airspace you have here, like area Castrop, all this kind of stuff. It's just general things. Then we're coming down to the movement area. This is going to be the first new big thing that might be a little bit difficult for a lot of you to understand. So we are trying to move closer to the real Navier way of doing things, and also about how we are specifying the different areas of the movement area. So we're finally introducing this thing about that the movement area of Copenhagen is divided into 4 specific different areas. So you have the Tower West and Tower East, the 2 different areas with the tower. You have Ground West, which is the western part of the movement area, and you have Ground East, which is the eastern part of the movement area. This will get difficult. This will be difficult for some controllers in the beginning to understand, but you have to understand that this is 4 geographical locations, and they kind of change a little bit depending on everything, but they're not tied to a specific position necessarily. The reason I do this in real life is that we still are missing one big thing on VATSIM, which is automatic cross-coupling of frequencies. Like in real life, when you have an airplane holding short of 30, you never have to figure out which tower to contact. It will always be the 11858, which is called now. Because no matter who's online, they do automatic coupling of the frequencies. We don't have that yet on VATSIM, but we're making this system anticipating that this is going to be a thing, hopefully before too long. So Tower West, East, Ground West, East, these are physical areas. And don't get confused by something called tower, something called ground. This has nothing to do with these underscore GND or underscore tower call signs. They have nothing to do with each other. It just sounds similar. So don't get it mixed up. Moving onwards, apart from the movement area, which is controlled by towers, you also have the apron areas, of course, which we already know, the apron north, that is generally controlled by Castrop apron, and then you have apron east, apron south, and apron west, and they're shown here as which geographical location they are under. But there's not really much to that, to be honest. It's all pretty simple when it comes to the aprons. You have some stuff that's being sold here that's apron east, south, and west. They fall underground east and west respectively, and they're controlled by the tower entity that controls that section. The apron frequency, the underscore ground frequency, is only north apron, and delivery is for all aprons. So they do delivery service for all aprons except for VFR at the holding points. Now, the next thing that we're going to come into is the chapter 2, the explanation of the tower and ground position. Now, what we're also doing here is that looking at the different positions here. Now, this is what they're going to be called in this manual. We also have to get away from this very basic thing of calling them these gyroscope identified call signs, because maybe it's underscore D tower, but it could also be underscore 1 tower. We're not in a place on VATSIM anymore where the gyroscope identifier is necessarily identical to the position. So when we're looking at this and when we're talking about this, while it says the normal gyroscope identifier for tower departure is D tower and tower arrival is A tower and tower ground west is C tower, we are going to talk to them in this manual. We're going to name them by these names, which are what they are. The tower that is responsible for the departure. So tower departure, tower arrival, tower ground west, and tower ground east, which we do not have on VATSIM at the moment because we don't have automatic cross coupling, and having it as a separate frequency is just too much. Next thing, the positions at the S1 levels. This is also pretty self-explanatory. Apron arrival, departure, sequencing, clearance, delivery. There's nothing new you have seen here, but it follows the same structure. This is what we're calling them. This is just what the normal gyroscope identifier is. As you're coming down, the next one here is the chapter 3. It just talks about the different responsibilities of the towers. So it will not really tell you much new. It's this thing you already know. You're responsible for issuing takeoff clearance. Notice this is new from all runways in Copenhagen. This means if you have 22 right, 22 right for departure, and then you have an A380 departing 22 left, it's still tower departure it gets handled to, even though it would be the air responsibility of tower arrival. So tower departure will do takeoff clearances for all runways in Copenhagen now. Apart from that, it's pretty simple. It's stating the ownership, of course, that the tower departure will take responsibility of ground west, so that means the C tower position, when that position is unstaffed. So there will always be the hierarchy. Tower departure will always take ground west. And of course, tower departure will also take tower arrival if that position is unstaffed. This is just wordings of what you already know. Tower is responsible. This is also going to be something a little bit new. It's not clearance delivery anymore that is responsible. It is going to be tower departure, which is responsible for coordination with the relevant departure controller. How we're going to be using this on the network moving forward, it depends. The delivery controller can simply just not give the clearance, just approve startup and then go onwards, and then clearance will come in at the tower. But it's going to be tower departure that's going to be responsible for providing a clearance. Now I did something weird here. Anyways, so next thing, you just need us, you can just ignore that for now. The next one is the tower arrival. Basically, same things as you've seen before. Responsible issue landing clearance for all active runways in Copenhagen. So that also includes if you have a landing to right, it's still arrival tower. And initial portion of the taxi. This is basically stuff that you will already know, just written down in other words. The tower ground west responsibility, again, don't get confused by this ground west responsibility. It's still what we normally know as C tower. Taxiing airplanes responsible for in and outbound feeding to correct holding points and feeder point for subsequent controller. One thing that has been a little bit iffy on our procedures, but now it's really been determined. Ground west, so the crossing tower, will never ever issue takeoff and landing clearances, unless other tower positions are offline, of course. But in the normal 3-tower structure, they will never issue takeoff and landing clearance. A landing on runway 30 would be arrival tower. A departure on runway 30 would be departing tower. Ground west is only doing taxi. This last ground east responsibility, which just says it's not supported in VATSIM yet. But we have the chapter in case we decide to put it in later, once we have automatic cross-coupling. Then it just will continue for the rest of some general things. How do we do VFR? What is the preferred routing in case of all these kind of things? One of these interesting things here, we normally use 04 right, 22 left. And if we're using 04 right, it will still be tower arrival that coordinates each pattern with tower departure. And this is simply because we are choosing in Copenhagen to say that it's more important that there is traffic information and the same controller controls the VFR to 4 right and arrivals 4 left to give correct traffic information rather than the tower departure being able to sequence it with departures. Then some helicopter procedures. It's very rare we have them, but finally we actually have them here. And yeah, basically you can read that through yourself. So what you see is that you can, here at the bottom, direct between either the previous LAI or the next LAI. You can also click here and see the revisions. And notice that you can also press export and you can export the whole thing as a PDF file as well if you want to do that. So this was the first general LAI about the tower control. Go next, it's going to be the one specifically about apron control. And here you will really very much see nothing new. It is absolutely completely the same. You will have the same pushback routes. There's going to be a little bit about the CDMs and how that works. A little bit about some stand restriction about who's allowed to park where. Finally getting that down on text. A little bit about pushbacks and that we have to use the pushback documentation to provide the correct pushbacks. Taxiway restrictions, we're finally putting that down on paper now, so that's it's there. Like the heavy airplanes may not face Northern Romeo and Sierra because they can't do that. Two heavy airplanes may not pass each other on Zulu and Yankee. It's these kind of things. Taxiway Yankee between Alpha and Lima is not allowed for heavies, except for these three, and so on and so on and so forth. These are finally now in text, so you can actually read them and familiarize yourself with them. The next thing is just going to be a few chapters that are going to explain the different taxi routes for the different runways. Again, you have seen all these before. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go through them because these are the general one as always. That's it for the apron control. So before you're locking on apron and as you're sitting on this one endorsement, this is the one that's good to read through. Go next, coordination agreements. There's going to be a few changes here. So first and foremostly, we are finally putting in about what do you need to do regards to runway use. Tower has to advise apron in use, and you have to use the different procedures. For arrivals, Tower is going to be responsible for having the correct gate set in top sky before handover. So it's all these kind of small things. If you decide to do a landing on runway 1230, it will be tower arrival's responsibility to advise apron that operation is currently going on runway 30, because apron needs to give extra space because these airplanes are vacating to hold short taxiway Yankee instead of Zulu. So there's some things here, good things to read about this kind of stuff. Otherwise, the stuff that you've seen before, we have chosen not to have the visual layout for the taxi routes from the towers, but instead this table that shows, well, when it coming from each runway, where does it need to taxi and where to hold short. So okay, we say 22 left is in use. Is it going from Alpha 31 to 34? It's by Kilo 1 short of Kilo, 25 to 33, Kilo 2 short of Kilo, Alpha 4 to 8, and 17 to 23, Kilo 3 short of Zulu, and Bravo short of Zulu. So this is the way to see where the airplanes are needing to taxi. For departing airplane, it's exactly the same. Again, it's from apron, where do they need to hold short? This is the table. It's also in the visual representation, really. Then there's some different things between tower and apron in regard to change of runway use and how to adapt the use of taxiways until the runway change is complete. That has to be then individually coordinated for each airplane, and how to deal with de-icing. Things that are not really super important, but good to read through. The second one is going to be coordination between tower and approach. So notice here that you need to read this as tower, but also as apron. If you approach, it's also good to read this. However, what you're reading here is basically identical to what you will read in the coordination chapter once we go to the next level. So again, some things that if it's a visual cleared airplane, it must be marked with VA. If you want to clear an airplane for the approach for another runway, then the one is in use, then it has to be coordinated with Castro Tower, the arrival tag has to be changed, and proper separation has to be achieved in relation to the rules for parallel crossing operation. And so there's some little bit of all this stuff. There's some different to departing airplanes. So of course, Castro Tower must clear departures with the SIDs that are approved. Jet prop restrictions has to be ensured with full compliance. And this is actually something pretty new. This is the Castro Tower may, without coordination, change the departure clearance by the aircraft to one of these, to these three things without prior coordination. If you want to clear it lower than the standard clearance, if you want to go straight ahead, and if from 04 right, if you want to clear on turns between 350 and 390. However, it has to be clearly indicated in the tag. With departure from parallel runways, this is something people apparently are quite bad at, is of course tower's responsibility to make sure that the separation between those two runways. Then there's some special cases in case of departure from another runway than a runway in use. For example, if you suddenly want to use runway 12, you have to get clearance from departure. This is noting that if you are talking about flights departing from parallel runways, this does not need to be coordinated. You'll see later on in all the runway use chapters that parallel runways are considered one runway. Castro Tower must have approval before taking flights from Copenhagen to either Roskilde or another airport in Copenhagen TMA or an airport within Malmö TMA. IFR departures, touch and goes, low passes, all these kind of things must also be coordinated with approach. Then you have procedures for if you wish to change the runway, which is being taken a little bit too lightly on VATSIM. So now we have proper procedure of how to do it. So Kastrup Tower is the one issuing it, and he must coordinate with approach Copenhagen. And this must include what's the new runway going to be, what's going to be the last landing plane from the old runway, what's going to be the first landing and departing airplane from the new runway, and if it's a crossing operation that's being introduced, this has to be highlighted as well. So you have to make a plan when you change the runway and communicate that to Copenhagen approach as tower to make his life easier. And from there on, approach is responsible for communicating onwards. So that's basically how it is. Crossing runways, there's going to be also the procedures. Well, this is the real procedures, and this is definitely what some controllers are not really understanding. So if you do a crossing runway, you have to have 3 mile separation between the airplane. So you see this is 2 to right, 2 to left, and here's 1, 2, 3, 0. When an airplane is landing here, from the time he is there, the next airplane is here, there must be 3 nautical miles. It's not just as soon as he is clear, the other one can land. There must be this 3 miles. This is the rules. So, and this means that maybe you have to think a little bit more about before giving that inbound clearance to runway 30 if there's a lot of traffic. And yeah, then there is this thing. This is going to be repeated a few times, but that is in case 122 to right is being used. It's very rare, but it does happen. Then all SIDs are suspended and all departures must fly according to this. Then there's VFR flights. That's basically it for the coordination between. And now is only the last 4 chapters, which are concerning with the different runways in use. So it always starts with noise abatement. What you have, what is specifically noise abatement for this runway. Then it's about the traffic procedures, about the handover coordination. This. If you click this, this is the, you can see here, this is the table that we have. It's just there in case you need it. Parallel operation, again, this is what I talked about earlier. When runway 04 right, the 04 left used for landing and 04 right for departure, runways can be used independently from each other. And departures from 04 right, 04 left is considered one runway in terms of separation. Also means you don't have to coordinate. Then there's departure separation. This is the same thing as you've been reading before. There's the different things you have to do before sending off jets after props. You can see here if a class 1 AB airplane, if it's turboprop, is ahead of a class CD, which is heavy jet, you have to either the AB turn 45 degrees off track and then turn verify before clearing the trailing, or the CDs only clear to 3000 after the smaller one has been observed passing 2500, or C, that you provide 2 minutes of separation in between the two of them. So this is also going to be pretty simple. Also, of course, for the 04, some of you may know, there is this extra, which means that KMAX departures must be separated with at least 3 nautical miles before the next one, because approach doesn't have any chance of separating these things. And from there on, it has different chapters that's basically talking about different runways in use. And here we're just going to scroll into this picture real quick. So we talked about ground west, ground east, tower west, tower east, all these things. So each of the runway configurations has this image. It is showing the geographical area on the left, and they might be put together. For example, you see here ground east put together with, actually here's a, this should have been tower east, so that's just a little bit of a mistake. Tower east, ground east should have been there, and that is controlled by tower arrival in this configuration. Now this is the standard 04 right, 04 left coordination, where landings come 04 left and departures 04 right. And there you see ground east, which is basically the cargo apron, is controlled by the tower arrival frequency. And ground west is controlled here. This is basically the thing that you will see on all of the runway in use documents. What else does this contain? Well, it basically contains specific instructions for each of the towers. So when you're locking on, you want to sit on Copenhagen, what are we using today? We're using 04 left, 04 right. So you can go in to the LAI for 04 left, 04 right, find the runway configuration, runway in use, this means 04 left arrival, 04 right departures, and you can read about the different ones. So Tower west area is controlled by tower arrival for landings. Okay. Landing traffic is turned left on alpha to hold short of runway 30 and handed over to ground west no later than passing de-icing platform alpha. So there's also a last time we have to hand them over. Traffic vacated to the right need to be individually coordinated between tower west and tower east. Then there's specific instruction for ground west. Controlled by ground west, traffic is handed over holding short of 30. Stand should be free and correctly distributed, of course, according to the table 2, which you will find at the end of the LAI. This is the same table you already seen. Tower, the ground west may choose to coordinate with arrival to be bypassed so the traffic is crossed directly over to apron arrival by tower arrival. So that means that basically the tower ground west tower arrival can coordinate, so instead of holding short of alpha and then being crossed, that there is a chance to just bypass completely and head straight over to apron. So we're allowing these kinds uh, of coordination measures to make life a little bit easier. Then it says a little bit about departure. Departure, of course, the active runway by ground west will be assigned the holding point. They will be transferred to tower departure no later than passing Bravo 4. So that means passing Bravo 4 here, they need to be transferred over. And if the intersection Bravo 4 is desired, then it should be coordinated with tower departure ahead and the transfer as they are going approaching the holding point. Tower east, there will be something a little bit as well, but what they get. Oh, sorry about that. So this is basically what one of them wants. So this is runway use, so for left, so for right, and there's a specific description for each. So this is not stuff to learn by heart. The stuff we saw before, tower control, area of responsibility, who controls what are your responsibilities. You need to know that, how to handle VFR, how to handle helicopters. Same with apron control. You're setting an apron, you have to do all these kind of things. Coordination agreements. Nice to know most of them, but of course you can look it up. This is not learned by heart. This is something you can look up to just be reminded of specific things. Now, this one, of course, is a rather easy one because it's a very standard runway configuration. But then we move onwards, like this one, which is a possible runway configuration. 04 left arrival, 04 right departure, and 304 arrival. How do we do this? Well, then it's going to say. You can already see here that's so it's going to be tower west, that's going to be tower arrival. He's going to arrival 04 left. It's going to be tower departure that has ground east, and he's going to handle departures as well as landings. And the ground west is going to be handling these. So now we're finally going to be talking about these crossing runway operations because there's not enough procedures on this. Again, sorry about that. Again, it will tell you very specifically tower west will be controlled, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Landing traffic left to join alpha. There's a lot of stuff just to read, but it's pretty simple stuff. Tower east, this one is important. Comply with procedure restrictions for landing airplanes on runway 30 as per the LAI concerning runway 30. So we're not adding all the runway 30 information again for the 04s. It's just because you're using this for arrival as well. Ground west. Here is going to be a new interesting thing, especially because it's been so confusing. So you see here with the crossing runways, it is tower arrival or tower departure that is handling these. Ground west does not handle landing clearances. However, if you look at this one here, departures will cross the active runway by the ground west after coordination with tower departure. That means that when you have the crossing operation, it's not the same controller that handles landings and crossings. That is, will be two different controllers. Because what you want is you want to have peace on the frequency. And if you have people calling up for crossing approvals at the same time, landings, it's no good. So that's why the ground west will cross as he's always used to, but he will coordinate because he has to cross through an active runway now. Tower ground west is not allowed to dedicate the crossing to tower arrival or tower departure when 30 is designated as the landing runway, basically meaning you're not allowed to just bypass ground west and go straight to tower departure for the crossing. This is ground west's responsibility. It is to cross airplanes and sequence them in. You can't give that to others. So read through these things when you have the thing. Then you have 04 right in use as a single runway ups. You have 04 left in use as a single runway ups. And it's talking about these things. You just have the last chapter, two last chapters. One is restrictions, which is for all the runways 04. So you just have to yeah, read through this so you know. So in case of parallel approaches to 04 left, 04 right, if you have a heavy going on 04 left, so the first one basically, and the lighter one going on 4 right, then if the heavy one goes around, the lighter one has to go around as well, because you will not have the provided clearance. Um, 04 left, 30, not approved for landing with the A380s, of course, we know that. Departure from 04 right, Bravo 4 is only allowed a turboprop or specifically requested. And airplane must enter or vacate the runway as aircraft restrictions for all runways. This we're going to look at in a second. 04 left is not to be used in nighttime hours from 23 to 0600. So we made this appendix actually to show the different restrictions. It may look a little bit difficult to look through. So it basically is showing where the different airplanes are allowed to enter the different runways. So if it's green, it's all runways or all types of airplanes are allowed. If it is this kind of light green, that's when we are sorting out these very long, slender heavies like 777, the new 777, 340-500, 600, A350, 1000. So these are the ones that has these special restrictions. Like, so you cannot use Bravo 4, they cannot use Kilo 2, Kilo 3, all these kind of things. But the regular heavy airplanes can use them. And then we have the slightly orange ones. These are ones that are only allowed for the medium ones, and then these small heavies, as we call them, 757 and 767 and A300. And then, of course, we have the red ones, which are the ones we say do not use, except if it's a light airplane and you can do what you want, of course. These are the ones that are not allowed. So we have this that you can look into and kind of help you. This also shows A380 routes and 747-8 routes and stuff like this. So that's there in case you want it. Taxiway restrictions, there are going to be some few things there. And then last of all, of course, the taxiway table for the arrival runways in case you want it. Going to the next one, this is runway 12. Again, showing the runway 12 operations. It says the departure separations. These are pretty much the same. What you have to do, again, we're looking for the first one. This is going to be for runway 12 only, arrival departure. You see that it doesn't matter now, Tower East, Tower West. It's basically arrival and departure. So you can choose either one. You cannot have you cannot have 3 towers because these two will only control one, and the ground west will control everything else. And there are procedures in here to show how do you hand over with tower ground west. For example, controlled by either one. Arriving airplanes shall vacate either Gulf 2 to hold short of Gulf or Gulf 1 and hold short after vacating is order for the cargo apron. They should be handed over to ground west as soon as practical after landing. Arriving aircraft to the apron south may be vacate right onto November 1 as long as it's wake turbulence class medium or less. In case of vacating on taxiway Bravo, this shall be coordinated waypoint to hold short of Yankee. So this is for the ones that land on Bravo and they stop. They land on 1-2 and they can stop all the way from Bravo. This needs to be specifically coordinated because they have to hold short of Yankee. So there's some different things, and all these things you can read through. Then you have the infamous 1-2 arrival, 2-2 right departure. Again, you see a different setup of the tower controllers. You see descriptions of the tower controllers that you need. Runway 1-2 is when you have this very specific. It's only with runway 1-2 and 2-2 right that all SIDs are cancelled, and you must adhere to these procedures because otherwise it will spell doom. Again, different restrictions. Runway restrictions, taxiway restrictions. There are a lot of restrictions with 1-2. Some controllers know it, some don't. First of all, you cannot land with A380 and these kind of ones. All aircraft have to enter on 1-2 in accordance with these aircraft restrictions. Departure of Fox 1 Kilo 1 must be initiated from this X-ray 1-2 point due to JetBlast, so they must taxi up to Kilo 2 and depart. And so on and so forth. As we go to 2-2 right, again, you will see the same thing. Noise abatement is very similar, except that you will have a little bit more, given that AMA is going to be part of the noise abatement, so they're not allowed to turn after departure. They have to cross the coastline first. Some traffic procedures, some parallel operations, departure separations. This is pretty much the same thing for all runways. Then you have the specific one. This one is a very, very normal one. It shows departure from 2-2 right. It shows arrival for 2-2 left. And ground west is crossing them. And ground east is with tower arrival. So that is exactly as you know it. It's just being put into a new format. Again, it says specific for Tower East, specifically for Ground West, specific for Tower West. There's nothing new except this, that it has to be, airplane will be transferred to Tower West for 2 to right latest when there are beam, the icing platform. Then you will have the single runway ups for 2 to left. You will also have the single ups for 2 to right. That's going to show, for example, a very nice taxi route, which is landing traffic can turn left off on Echo 4 if they can, but otherwise they have to go left onto Alpha 8. So that means they have to go off Echo 4. If they can't, they have to go off at Alpha 8, then have to do Alpha to hold short of Alpha 3 is what the procedures will state. Then from there, they will be taken by Ground West. That's going to take them down via Delta to cross them over because, of course, you're going to have departures coming this way. So these kind of tricky procedures are being described here below so that you have something to find for all the different runways in use. Again, restrictions, runway restrictions, taxiway restrictions, stuff that you probably should know. Then runway 30, again, you will have the same traffic procedures, crossing operations, separation requirements, the different configurations. This one is also a nice one with the departure 2 to right landing 30. You have to read that through if that is the case. You also have a very more non-standard one, which is arrival 30 departure 4 right. Again, with the purpose of saying that it's the same tower that controls everything, and the Ground West is not going to be online for this configuration. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. And again, 30 for arrival, departure for 2 left. That's also an approved configuration. All configurations that are not in here are considered not to be used unless really demanded. And that basically concludes it for the S2 part of it. So that was the LAI for Castrop Tower, general one, which is not really important, one for tower control, apron control, coordination agreements, and 4 for the different runways in use. Brand new way of looking at things. Let's now go, hope you're still with me, to the approach part of things. So ATC Copenhagen. Again, this is a collection of 6 LAIs. The first one is the general one, and it contains the same as the tower. It just explains what you can expect and abbreviations and so on and so forth. Going forward, we have one that deals with approach control, one that deals with the use of the runways, and then we have 3 different coordination chapters, one for tower, one for ACC, one for Sweden. The approach control first one is absolutely the most important one. So this is everything that you need to do as approach controller. And there's definitely some new things here. First of all, we finally are putting this in with delegated area. We need controllers to understand the airspace they're controlling. So here we will look through the different areas. Basically, you have the area L1 over Airnov, the area L2, which is basically the one you have over here. You have the area Kastrup, that's the one that the control zone have. You have the area Sunnel, which is basically another one here that you also have. And of course, then you have the 2 borrowed areas for the ILS, area 1, area 22, and area 30. This is what you find in the LOA as well, but I don't think anybody read it because nobody reads these things. L1, L2, 22, 30. Other areas of interest, central Copenhagen, which means no flights over 25 or under 2500, and area Malmö City, which is right here, which is no propellers under 3000, no rivals under 5000, so on and so forth. And the limitation is that if we have too much traffic, we can disregard it because it's VATSIM. Then it just shows area responsibility, how is the TMA built up, what's next to it, where's Roskilde TMA. It shows the different entities, approach west, east, departure, Roskilde, departure, Copenhagen, København, and the final. And here you see the area responsibility of the different ones. And here comes a new thing, and there you really have to try not to get confused. The first thing that will spring into your mind here is you see approach west has area of responsibility from flight over 75 to 195, and departure Roskilde is from ground to 75. And the same thing here, it's the same thing everywhere. So what does that mean? Well, that is how they do it in real life. It doesn't mean that you have to transfer the airplanes. It just means that whenever you're moving into the area of responsibility of the other controller, you have to yield. So basically that means we are adopting a procedure of arrivals that are coming in. Once they get descended below level 75, they have to yield to departing airplanes. Once departing airplanes are cleared above flight level 70, they have to yield to arrival airplanes. So think of it as this, as whenever you clear someone to level 190, you have to take care to yield for any approaching airplanes and coordinate as appropriately, and vice versa, of course. And here's just the drawings of how the different airspaces look, so that's nice. Hierarchy, all this kind of stuff. Responsibility of VFR flights is handled by the controller, whose TMA is directly above the VFR flights. That's what we know. Again, you have the same window here. Position, this is what we are going to refer them to. Approach west, approach east, departure Roskilde, departure Copenhagen, and approach Roskilde. And final, of course. So this is the same as the tower. Then it just talks about the different responsibilities from different controllers. This is actually a little bit new. So approach west is responsible for all arriving traffic within area's responsibility with destination Copenhagen. Approach west extends from 75 to 195. All operations below flight level 75 shall be done in coordination with the underlying departure controller and in consideration of his traffic. So this basically means that once you descend them, you might want to think about keep them in level 80 a little bit more than usual, because once you descend them below level 75, you have to take care to avoid departures. It will also mean that you as a post controller might be slightly more careful with when you are choosing to descend airplanes. Like, for example, for runway 22, you get them here at Corsa, you put them over here, they go downwind and they come in. Well, you're going to have flights departing out here to Odin, so maybe now it's not such a good idea to clear for people to 5,000 feet right here, because that's going to be bad because you have to yield suddenly to all departing airplane. Instead, you just keep them at flight level 80. As long as you do that or above, you have the upper hand and departure has to take consideration to you. That's basically how we're going to do it to make this more smooth. The last two lines, it's basically how you take over. So in case the underlying departure position is unmanned by either one of the departure controllers, then approach west take that responsibility. And in case that the other approach sector is unmanned, then west takes the responsibility of that airspace as well as the departing airspace if neither one of the departing is online. This is a new way of writing what we already know, but now we have it in writing. There's nothing new there. And for the approach east, it's basically the same. It's just a little bit of a warning there. Just you do not hand over between departure and arrivals just because they have a responsibility. You just enter the different AORs and you have to yield. Departure R and departure K, this is basically similar. Then you talk about final. Final is responsible for arriving to Copenhagen from downwind leg until established on final, for effectively communicating to approach Copenhagen and Kastrup Tower if the reduced separation procedure is in effect. We have to be better at this. It will also be highlighted a little bit, but you better start learning these words now with the reduced separation procedure, because we need it, especially on Mondays. Lastly, just talks about approach Roskilde, that talks about departing and arriving aircraft within Roskilde. We have combined these two LAIs because they'll be controlled by similar controllers almost all the time. Then there's a chapter about internal coordination. Again, internal coordination, you've seen this one between final. What you will have though is a new separation procedure here. And this you really have to adhere to, and this you have to read and be familiar with. So the following shall be respected. Average, minimum 10 miles separation with the regular separation procedure, because final needs to put them in when this is in effect with 5 nautical miles, which is the regular one. So therefore you need at least 10 nautical miles minimum. However, if you put the reduced separation and you may go down to as little as 2.5 miles, then the different approach sectors may go as far down as 7.5. No matter, it's, again, keep in mind, this is the average. So even if you have reduced separation procedure here, If you have two that has 5 miles between each other, then it needs to be 10 miles to the next ones. So basically, here's number one, then you have 5 miles to the next one. Well, you needed 7.5, so you need to put those 2.5 over to the next one and give 10 between the next two so that you have the average. No matter what average you're using, you are never allowed to have less than 5 miles. So this is the internal between approach east-west and final. Um, Then it states as well, airplane not on a published star must have a side heading, also meaning you don't have to coordinate it, you just have to give them the heading. The transfers that are not in accordance with the table up here, that has to be clearly indicated, and all this kind of stuff. If final decides to change the sequence, then airplanes can be sent back to approach, and approach need to be ready for this. Then you have coordination between approach east-west and departure. That's this thing we were talking about basically just before. Especially interesting is when you have the TIDVO arrivals, because Sweden is going to hand them over already in basically departures AORs. And if there's issues there, then it's approach that has to be a little bit ahead to coordinate with departures. So next thing, coordinations between approach departure and Roskilde. The arrivals via Ernov that goes to Roskilde is handed directly to Roskilde approach without subject to coordination. Arrivals via Castro VOR is handled initially by departure. There's actually some mistakes here, but I'll correct that later. Transfers, there's going to be something new. We are not using these. Remember, you have the transfer and release in Euroscope. This we still use to foreign sectors, but once we are within Danish sectors, we don't use that anymore because everything from now on will include a standard release. So we have to use the transfer and assume function. Once you do the transfer, it will automatically include a release for any turns, any change of altitude, and any changes of speed. So this is an entire Denmark. Keep in mind, transfer to Malmö shall still be doing the same. It does not include a standard release, and this must be done by the transfer release function. Use of radar, there's going to be something new here as well. So minimum 5 nautical miles between all arrivals. If it can't be achieved, 1,000 feet is what you need to have. At 3 nautical miles, loss of separation is occurring and a warning will be issued. Final shall observe 5 miles between separation and never less than 3. At 3 nautical miles, the trailing airplane must abort the approach. That is the standard radar separation you need to have. Then we have this one about the reduced separation procedure, that we can go down to final all the way down to 2.5 miles. And the 2.5 miles is within 15 miles of the ILS. And we can't really, we're not precise enough to give 2.5, but that means we can aim to give a 3 to 3.5, which can really put in a lot of airplanes. We are aiming for 3 nautical miles. It's just the 2.5 gives you this. If you're keeping 160 to 4 miles final, then once you're hitting 4 miles final, this airplane, he's going to slow down, and then the separation is going to decrease until this guy hits the 4 miles. So that's why we have a little bit of margin, but generally you should never aim for 2.5 miles. You should aim for 3 miles or above. So in order to do this, you have to make sure these are fulfilled. And as final, you have to make sure this is fulfilled. So arrival needs to be advised, and he needs to expedite vacating airplanes. I need to tell them as well, because you're going to have a bad time if you have 3 nautical miles separation between each and someone is missing Bravo 4 and has to go Bravo 3. You're going to have a missed approach, and you want to avoid missed approach. Second thing, you can have no tailwind to the runway or no extreme crosswind. It must be 2 to left or 4 left, and the departures must be handled by a separate tower controller. That means you cannot use this reduced separation if you only have one tower down in Copenhagen. You must have several towers before you can do this, because the tower arrival must be able to completely concentrate on the arrivals. Then lastly, there's just some stuff between captain control zone. You have to be 1,700 feet or above the airplanes that are flying close to the lateral border, except for blah blah blah. You can read this yourself. That is the stuff that is special for all approach control. The next chapter is the use of runways. It's a very short chapter that talks about the different usage of the runway. First of all, noise abatement, identical to what you've read already. How you can use 04 right and left. All northbound turns, they shall be limited to heading 350. So that means you're not allowed to ask tower to, after departure, turn him left heading 270, because it takes him right over Copenhagen. All departures 04 left must not commence any turn until passing Charlie Hotel 839. Again, obstacles, noise abatement, all this kind of stuff. Arriving airplanes, parallel approaches, that is the pen approach that may go as little as 2 nautical miles, as long as the heavier one is to 04 left. So the heavier one has to be on the closest runway. You should have 2 to right, 2 to left. This is exactly the same. Departures has to pass blah, blah, blah. Again, 2 to right, 2 to left may go as little as 2 nautical miles. That's the thing. 1230, there's going to be a little bit more in regards to the noise sensitives. You can't just use it as you like. 1230 may only be used for departure when wind is deemed too high to effectively use the main runways, although never less than 15 knots. It's the same procedures. You need at least 15 knots, but you need more than that normally as well. In case 12 is used for takeoff and landing, then you have to reduce the hourly arrival rate. Departure from 12 has to pass a certain point, and departure from 30 is not allowed to turn before this Bafik point. Arriving airplanes, blah, 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 is basically the same thing. You know it as well. And some runway restrictions. It's some things that's good to know about the rules for how you may ask Tower to use the different runways. The fourth one, hope you're still with me, coordination with Tower. Here you have all the different coordination agreements you have with Tower. You will see a lot of this stuff is going again. That's why we're going to go quickly through this, because it's the same thing that you read in the Tower coordination with approach. Obviously, it's the same. There are going to be a few different things, but it is going to be almost exactly the same thing. It's going to be a little bit with missed approaches. There's going to be a little bit with Roskilde Tower, of course. So Roskilde Tower needs approval from departure in regards to any eastbound departure. There's going to be a little bit if you have Roskilde Tower online. But other than that, exactly the same. Next is coordination with ACC Copenhagen. You may already think now, why didn't I see anything about the approved stars or the approved levels and stuff like this for approach control? That's because this is about coordination with ACC Copenhagen. So you start, we have the classification. You can see the different sectors around you. You can see how it looks in 2D. You have a different area of responsibilities from the different sectors. You will have the general radar transfer approval. The amount of radar separation required is depending on whether coordination is made via Euroscope or via Discord or something else. If you don't say anything, it's a silent transfer. It has to be at least 10 miles. If it's with coordination, then you can go down to 5 miles. The separation, the minimum distance to adjacent sectors has to be 2.5 miles. That is the same as we know it now, and the same with everything else. Everything that has anything to do with ACCs, this is how it is going to be. And you will see it again and again. 2.5 miles to adjacent sectors, 10 miles and increasing if it's silent transfer, 5 and increasing if it is prior coordinated voice. And this is the same for all the LOAs as well. Again, you will have the use of transfer assume commands. So that's this same thing, turn, change of speed, change of altitude. Arriving airplanes. So here's going to be some interesting new things. So ACC command will give clearance via the appropriate star unless one of these 4 directs are given. 2 to left, unless 2 to left and use specific coordination must be in place for these ones because they can only land on 2 to left, 4 right. Unless specifically requested by approach, Copenhagen is free to assign any speed higher than standard as long as it's shown in the tag and that the speed is being reported by the pilot to approach Copenhagen. Changes to runway in use. We are highlighting that approach Copenhagen is responsible for advising the ACC Copenhagen about the change. And approach Roskilde is responsible for advising the ACC sector slot launch use in Roskilde. Then you basically have the subchapters about just giving the different arrivals from different sectors. This is from Sector Bravo. It gives the SFL, which is the standard flight level, arrival fixes, stars, restrictions, all this, who should be transferred to. Special procedures in peak time. This is also new, and this is also going to be very important because we know how the Monday events can be. So what does this say? It says in peak time, due to where we don't have flow management or arrival coordinators, we have to be very specific on this because in real life they will have some guy sitting there with the big picture and saying exactly what to delay. We don't have this. So restrictions on the previous chapter that we just went through, then will still be respected, but also in addition, this is what you have to do. So The sector Bravo, that's the one that does the Monarch arrivals, he has to identify arrivals coming from Tidvu and a missed approach procedure if Tutu left is in use. So he must do the 10 nautical miles separation between each airplane. This must be increased to 15 miles every time there is a Tidwu arrival or a missed approach that needs to be resequenced in between a Monarch arrival. So he can go all the way down to 10 miles, but he has to look over to see what comes from Tidwu, normally not too much, and be ready to increase that to 15 miles every time there is a Tidwu arrival. If you don't have the capacity to do this, you have to do a continuous 15-mile spacing. Yeah, that's basically it. This thing is going to be deleted, so you can basically disregard that. Arriving from sector India, well, there's no rivals to Copenhagen Cash over there, but there's a rival to Roskilde, which says that all this flight of 70 is via Robus, 70 below at Robus, and transfer control communication will be to approach Romeo Kilo. Then you have the Delta one, that's the Corsa. Again, it looks very similar, except for different runways, different approach controllers. This is new. If the flight has the flight level below level 60, if he's cruising level 60 or below, you actually have to hand over to approach Roskilde. So, because it goes into his airspace and it's so low that he will deal with that. Of course, Roskilde is very seldomly online, but that actually means you have to send him over to departure. Again, special procedures, and these are different because it's a different place, but the first part is the same, so you still must respect the 10 nautical miles, so you must do at least 10 nautical miles unless otherwise coordinated. You have to identify airplanes coming via air of Tespi, add missed approach to 4 left in use, and increase to 15 miles every time an Airnov or Tespi arrival or a missed approach needs to be sequenced in between a Tutla arrival. And this is very difficult to see, to be honest, so yeah. And you have to increase the separation to minimum 20 miles if you can see that there is a continuous stream of arrivals coming from both Ernov and Tespi. What does this mean? Well, do I have this one? Actually, I have this one that we can use too. Well, this means as you have airplanes coming in here via Corsa, airplanes coming in here via Corsa. If you have a stream coming here and a stream coming here, you can see the planes keep coming kind of periodically. There's no break in mind. Then you have to take action of that because otherwise it becomes super problematic. So increase the separation to minimum 20 miles in between. I know this is a lot, but this is what we need, 20 miles between each arrival. If you have a continuous stream from Tespi and Ernov. If you don't have the capacity, you must just do a continuous 15 or 20 miles spacing. From sector Echo, it's the same thing, just Tespi instead, different things, special procedures are the same, arrival to other airports, that's pretty simple. Departing airplanes, a few new things here. So approach Copenhagen, check clear in accordance with the table here. They may assign a speed, they may decide the speed themselves as long as it's shown on the tag. The transfer is assuming a standard release again. And the departing aircraft use of SIDs. Now, this is actually a new thing. So we have new direct coordinations. That's what we have here. So approach may send without coordination to Alpha Alpha Lima and the different destinations in Karup, Aarhus, and Aalborg. If it goes to sector Delta, it will be allowed to send to Fox Echo, Gelbaloxa, Reporixo for Karup. If it goes down to sector India, it may do Echo, Echo Lima, or Mikos as you like, depending on the different ones. So we have these now don't require coordination. Approach may send direct Echo, Echo Lima, Mikos, and Aalborg, as well as the fixes for the regional ones. For airplanes with a requested flight of a 60 or less, coordination with Roskilde approach shall take place for all westbound departure. Again, normally approach is not online, so it would be departure that takes over, and it's departure anyway, so normally there won't be that much. Standard flight levels out of Roskilde is there as well. Releases from Copenhagen, again, all this, so further climbs and speeds and turns and departure via Veda and Salo is something that we have to talk through as well. This is also something new. So if we go via Salo, it may go through the sector Bravo, and it's approved as long as approach makes sure that there's separation in between the monarch arrivals that it crosses, and it has to be above level 9.5 before entering the airspace in order to appropriately clear the arrivals. Departures via Vita, this is more kind of an administrative thing because they technically can go through Sector Echo if they climb slowly, but it can be, if they do that, it can be disregarded. We're not going to coordinate it. A little bit about transit flights, especially when it comes to flights that are being handled from ACC to approach that goes over to Malmö or that goes through approach airspace, and VFR flights as well. So that's basically it for all the coordination that you have to do with ACC Copenhagen. Hope you're still alive. The next one is coordination with ACC Malmö. It is very similar. You have the different things. You have the area responsibilities, the radar separation, some general stuff. This is very much the same. Approach Copenhagen needs to advise ACC Malmö sector Lima kilobyte runway change in Copenhagen, and approach Roskilde is responsible for changes in Roskilde. This is the same. You'll see the same tables again via AirNav, inbound clearances, all this kind of stuff. As you see, we don't have special coordination procedures in effect for Sweden because it's too difficult to control. So it's better to have these special coordination procedures for peak times on the side of the ACC Copenhagen. Same for Tidvo. Airplanes going to Roskilde must be clear via this one. Maybe you've seen this before. The thing you're seeing here, it's basically what is the LOA. It's the same as the LOA, but we've taken it from the LOA and we're putting what's relevant for Approach Copenhagen into this document. So this also means that you actually will not have to look as much at the LOA anymore because the procedure of the LOA has been put in to these documents. Departing aircraft, use of SIDs, you can go direct NOVPO only. This is things you already know. CMA XALO. To Malmö TMA, it must be individual coordinated and you're not allowed to fly from approach Copenhagen airspace to Malmö TMA more than level 130. Transit flights, communication control, all this is LOA stuff. That's it. So we go back to the LA. Now we've been through the 8 pages of Kastrup Tower and we've been through the LAIs of approach Copenhagen. The approach control, use of runways, coordination with Tower, ACC, and Malmö. It's been a long one. Now, just the last one, and it's a little bit shorter actually, which is nice. So this is for the ACC, and this might be important for most of you C1 controllers, as it's also, as you're seeing this, is the first time you will hear about this brand new structure of ACC sectors. The one is general. There's nothing really interesting there. It's basically mostly administrative stuff. The LAI2 is what we're going to start with. It's about the ACC sector, so that's everything, structure, hierarchy, ownership, internal coordination, and all this kind of stuff. And then you will have 2 coordination chapters, one for all the Danish ATS stations, so that's with the local approaches, and the one with 4 ATS units, which is going to be all the LOA stuff. Let's start with the ACC sectors. General stuff to begin with. Airspace classifications, are they C, E, C, G, whatever they are. Sectorization classifications, and local ATS responsibilities, sector ownerships, okay, blah, blah, blah. Here is what we really need to talk about, which are the new sectors. The number first is the parent sector EKDK control on 136485. That is the one that controls everything. So a parent sector called EKDK control controls the entire airspace, including all local airports when no other ATC is online. Any online controller in any of the 3 areas that's highlighted in the next few sections, which we're going to talk about, they will take over for this frequency in this specific area. And now we go down and we look at the different areas. So first was Area West. It contains sector V, L, S, and N. V and L are on top of and below each other, and S and N are there controlling all airspace where these are split between level 285. Channels and frequencies, again, you have the area. This is the Area West. These are the subsplits. It hasn't been updated. It should say subsplit, subsplit north and subsplit south, and the different sectors that are controlling individual. And you have the frequency, you have the call sign, you have what they're called on the frequency. This is just very basic standards. That's good to see. And now comes hierarchy and ownership, and this is the stuff that you just have to memorize. It's the same for all of it. So area west sectors, they can only cover sectors in area west. By the way, this is area west, in case you're wondering. This is the yellow area is area west, and the four frequencies there, they can move around within that area depending on who's online, but they will never move outside. Hopefully that is clear by now. Any area west sitting as the only controller in that area assumes ownership of all the sectors regardless of other areas online. So this means, I should actually just open this separately. There we go, much better. That means that if you are logging on and you're sitting on the only one, so say you log on sector S, he's offline, he's offline, he's offline, you get the entire area west airspace. Pretty simple stuff. Sorry, I just have to find it here and go back. The next one, any area west controller logging on as the second controller must log on a call sign belonging to the opposite sub-split to ensure a balanced AOR. This is what you have here. You have the sub-split here, you have the sub-split here. Now we talked about that I logged on to sector S. That means the next one controller logging on, he must log on to either V or L to have the balanced AOR. You may be thinking why we're doing it like this. Well, let me show you here. When I'm logging on S, I'm taking the entire airspace, right? Now, if N comes on, then comes the question, does he control this, or do I control this, or does he take this one and I take this one, and what is the difference? There can be so many different ways of taking over different sectors. So in order to kind of cut in half the different options, we just say, well, we also do a subsplit here, meaning I was online, I controlled everything. The next one logging on, it had to be on the other side of the subsplit. Let's say it was Victor that logged on. Now he takes for sector Lima, so he takes this whole airspace and I take these two. So it's a way of making it be a little bit simpler. Any area west controller logging on to third controller may choose any remaining sector, because as soon as we split it once, it doesn't matter anymore. Local TMAs and CTAs are subject to the top-down coverage as follows. This is just which airports are controlled by which entities. Here you see that Aalborg, Karup, and Aarhus is sector L, Billund, Skrydstrup, Sønderborg, and yeah, I'm trying to remember what it's called now. Stauning is controlled by the sector S. So how does that look on the map? That basically looks like Aalborg is controlled by up here, Aarhus controlled there, Karup is controlled there. That makes sense. They controlled by sector L. Billund, they have a short overlay here where they're controlled by sector S. Skrydstrup, of course, Esbjerg is here, and Stauning is here, so of course they're controlled by there as well. So it's a generally very logical sense of what airports are controlled. Sector Lower East, now you come just exactly the same thing. So I'm not going to go through everything just again, but you will see again frequencies, subsplits, information, hierarchy. It's the same. It's called Lower East now instead of Area West, but it's the same. I log on as one position. I log on sector Delta. I control the whole thing. Next one that comes on must choose the opposite subsplit, so you must choose Bravo or India, and any subsequent controller may freely choose. It's that easy. Ownership for ACC is basically Copenhagen, and Roskilde will be sector India, and Odense will be sector Delta. So how does that going to be looking at the sector map? It's going to be looking like that if we are going to choose that this one is going to be the one that controls approach Copenhagen airspace as well. This is because he's the only sector without arrival stars, because you have Mona coming there, you got Tutlo coming there, you got Tespi coming there. So India is the one that will have the most capacity in a busy environment. That's why he will take it. Odense is located here, so it only makes sense that it's sector Delta. Nice and easy. The last one is going to be the sector upper east. Sector CNA sub split is there's just two. So you choose one, you take both, you choose the other one afterwards. Again, any upper east is only upper east, just like all the others. Any upper east in the only controller assumes ownership of all the areas. And the top down, you just have one because you have Ronne. That is the one that's going to be taken out by area upper east because they have the capacity to do it. So it's going to be sector A that takes care of Ronne when they are online. Looking from that, we have all the other good ACC stuff. We have holding patterns that are showing leg times and flight levels. We have the different holdings. We have a nice little image to show you all the holdings. Then you have coordination between ACC sectors. Now, start with a disclaimer now in order for people not to get confused. Look very, very closely at this because you're going to have three other LAIs concerning coordination. This is between ACC sectors. So it's internal coordination between each ACC sector. Because if you don't know this, you're going to look and say, it can't be right that this is all the coordination because it's not much. It's not much. Just different things. Again, here it says it again. Of course, I'm saying it again, but people don't always read these manuals. Coordination with local ATS units, that's in LAI 3. Foreign ATS units, LAI 4. Any deviation, as long as it's agreed between the ACC sector, is acceptable and overrides any procedure here. So if you're not happy with this procedure in a given situation, because there is a ton of different situations, you can individually coordinate your way out of it. There are special cases where separation or safety may be lost due to pilot error or unforeseen VATS implementation, and there you must use good controllermanship to solve an unwanted situation, even if it means disregarding normal procedures. Then we have about the use of squawks. We have about the use of radar. This I'm not going to go through because it's the same thing. Transfer and assume functions. Standard releases means that you don't have to use the transfer release anywhere in Copenhagen anymore. Are you with me so far? I hope so, because here comes coordination. Doesn't look like much, but there is a very interesting thing here that is going to be a new procedure and that we're all going to be happy about. Airplanes may be cleared to any point, to any RNAV point on their route, including inside TMAs and CTAs. Well, this is actually yeah, this should actually be removed. So they're not allowed to do it with inside TMAs and CTAs. I will get back to that why in a second. But airplanes may be cleared to any honor point on their route, as long as the following are respected. So what needs to be respected? 2.5 miles to Asian borders. Don't go through active military areas, which don't simulate anyway. And you're not allowed to do the point on stars or other point that takes airplanes in to approach Copenhagen airspace. And except for domestic flights, they may be cleared via Corsa and Tano, even though they're inside airspace. You're not allowed to clear into the approach Copenhagen airspace. You're not allowed, except for Tano and Corsa on domestic flights. So why am I putting this that inside the TMS and CTS? Because you are technically allowed to do it. However, again, remember what this piece of coordination is. It's between two ACC sectors. So I technically need permission as sector echo to clear to, for example, somewhere inside of Aalborg TMA. However, in reality, not, because there's going to be coordination agreements with approach as well. So this is still a little bit iffy, but as a general thing, you can clear to any point and you don't have to coordinate, but you cannot do it on stars. Then you have procedures of coordination. And what we've seen in the past is that there's so many different coordination procedures that it just gets impossible to highlight all of them. Therefore, I'm asking all of you as controllers to think for yourself a little bit and just use these things. All flights in need of descent are assumed to be cleared to the lowest level within your sector, sector flow plus 500, before the handover. The subsequent policy chapter offers special cases that goes beyond this. And it's the same for the climbs. You assume that they will need to be cleared to the highest possible level within your sector. This means, for example, for departures out of Copenhagen that goes to Ilde, I'm not going to put in a thing that says that you have to climb to level 280. You should know your airspace goes to level 285. You have to climb to level 280. We're going to be dealing with non-standard stuff that requires coordination. And what are these? There are not many, but there are just a few. Sector Alpha has nothing. Sector B for airplanes transiting to sector I, this is generally airplanes coming from Kodan that needs to go into Roskilde. They need to go via Robus. So they need to descend from sector India. Sorry, from sector Bravo, they go into India before they hit Robus. Because Robus is in sector India. And there, level 290 is going to be too high. They also don't have the level there. So there we say you descend to level 200. So there is a special coordination. Then a little bit for sector V and C. There is some different arrivals into Billund if they cut over other ACC areas before they head into Billund approach. What could that be, for example? That could, for example, be as you're coming from N, you're coming from over here, you go into Billund. We're coming in here, for example, 09. Well, you have just like this very short space in between. We actually go to sector S first. So here you're still allowed to clear to level 130 as per the internal coordination agreements. These are the kind of things that it's dealing with. This thing we talked about before, going into by Robus into Roskilde, well, Robus is kind of here. So if an airplane is coming here, he may be cleared down to level 200 by Bravo before headed over to India and being cleared up. So these are the kind of internal coordination specialties that this chapter is dealing with. 130, again, this is the same, 130 for Billund, 130 for Billund, 130 for Billund. Sector S is the other one that has a little bit one, which is when they come from the north and they'll be cleared down into Hamburg. They may be put down to level 250. It hasn't been written in yet, however, it will be the same here, going from sector L to sector Delta. Here, again, there's some different things here, but it's not really much. This is all there is of internal coordination. The next one, though, is a long one. This is the coordination with all the Danish ATS stations. So hopefully it's not going to take that long to go through, because I'm not going to go through much of it. Approach Copenhagen Roskilde. This is going to be similar to what you have already read, because it's the same, similar to the chapter that you read from coordination in the approach LAI. Delegated area, approach airspace. We're going to choose now to have this delegated airspace now on VATSIM. It's there real life, but we haven't really used it. It's not marked on Euroscope either. It's this airspace here, which is not a TMA. It's class Echo. And it goes actually not from ground, it's go to 3500 because it's uncontrolled below. That is meant for Roskilde. This is why that's if you know the arrivals into Roskilde, you're clearing them into flight level 70 to, of course, avoid stuff from flight level 80 into Copenhagen. But also that Roskilde approach can descend them a little bit earlier to get them into Roskilde. So there is this airspace here. And this we are simulating on VATSIM. Then you have the use of radar. This is all the same thing. We've been through it. Inbound clearances, we've been through it. The standard flight levels, the peak time, all this stuff we've been through. It's the same thing. Proceed with separate departing airplanes. Again, the use of SID. What can approach send direct to? It's the same because it's the same coordinations. From Roskilde, releases, departure Ivida Cello, transit flight, VFR flights. So don't have to read it twice. It's the same thing. Then you have approach Aalborg. This is basically how all the other ones are styled. And you can use the coordination bounds for Sindal is made through Aalborg approach. So that's always good to know. The map, it will come later. I'm still working on everything. There's some stuff about arrival airplanes, what they can be cleared to. Arriving aircraft are cleared to the following positions: Aalborg, Gearbook, Barcode, Delta for Sindal, direct destination for the airport, or as coordinated. So this means you can also send direct to these ones. For Aalborg, it's just in this part of the coordination. Departing airplanes, different clearances. Flight toward ACC Copenhagen, there has to be climb clearance. All levels of routing need to be coordinated with the ACC Copenhagen sector. However, you have to know that ACC Copenhagen can't be disregarded in case that they're going locally to Karup or Aarhus at the levels below, because they basically stay within their Jutlandish CTAs. There's the one on Karup. There's the one on all the others. I'm not going to go through all of them because it's very similar. Notice that Aalborg, they got new points, Europa Momse, just so you know. We're still in the process of changing them. Departure clearances, flight towards, it's basically very similar. Approach Bilon, there we have a map, but I'm still working on the rest of them. This will have very much some similar stuff, what you can clear inbound to, as coordinated, all these kind of things. Departing airplanes, they must be go to Abino if they're to Copenhagen or Roskilde. Everything that you need to know in regard to how you talk to Bilon will basically be here. And in the Bilon LAI, the same thing will be apparent. One thing that's going to be a little bit interesting here is Skrustrup. Skrustrup, which is controlled by S control, if locally seen not offline, is also in charge of AFIS Sønderborg. So these are lying pretty much the same place. That means that, of course, you now have what you can clear direct to for flights to Sønderborg. That's good to know. Um, However, there will be a thing that I might not have. I have not added yet. That's actually a shame. I'm going to add that. It's going to say that flights can be cleared to 3,500 feet if they're going to Sønderborg, if they go to Libri to runway 32. But however, if they're going to the other ones for runway 14, they're going to be taken into Skrydstrup airspace, and then they must be cleared level 70, and local ATC will clear them further. This will be added a little bit later on. But that's basically the most new things that there are there. Last but not least, I'm going to go through this quick. This is coordination with foreign ATC units. This might be a little bit long to go through. However, this is everything you have in the LOAs. It's just kind of gotten together into one big document. There's still some appendixes that hasn't been attached and all this kind of stuff, but please have some patience with me on this one. It's a big project. It has all the coordination schematics. It has the tactical directs. This is everything you find in the LOA, except that you don't have to look in the LOA. Also, boom, here you got everything you need from Bremen. Boom, here you got everything you need from Sweden. Everything we have as well. It's long, but it's everything we have. And notice that everything in between, for example, approach Copenhagen and approach Malmö has been cut out. It's only the stuff that's valid for ACC Copenhagen. Again, ACC Polaris comes in here. That's all the stuff that we have to Polaris. And then, of course, last but not least, you will have everything that you need from ACC Scottish as well. So everything is gone in one nice big LAI. And that basically concludes it. That is the 3 LAIs that so far have been made. One for tower, one for approach, and one for control. As you can see, there's a lot of stuff to read, and will take some time to get into all this, but hopefully you're gonna give it a nice attempt. And yeah, that's basically it. Good luck with everything. Everything will be updated as we go further, and you can of course see in each different LAI. You can see the different sectors. You can see the different revisions that have been made up. What is the latest change? Thank you very much if you made it all the way through, and hopefully you enjoy these new procedures.